Good morning. Today is Thursday, May 14th. We are studying Treasures of Talmud, which is the title given to this Omer period of study, these 7 weeks curriculum, where we are looking at how the rabbis understood what it means to be a human being. And so I've selected 7 lessons worth of treasures from the Babylonian Talmud for us to explore because they comment deeply on the human condition. So let us bless. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Um, Good to be together. Good to have this deep dive into Talmud, and I'll just set up what we're talking about today. So the subject for this, our sixth of 7 lessons. Next week is our last class because Thursday night, May 21st, sundown is Shavuot. So our final class will be on the 49th day of the Omer. Perfect timing. And then if you'd like to see a wonderful class of 25 or so students from our 10th grade celebrate Shavuot at confirmation, that service is held at 6 p.m. next Thursday night. Very sweet moment for the community as our 10th graders affirm the Torah they've embraced in their lives and give us great confidence that the Torah tradition is in the hands of a wonderful generation. Today's topic is called Death and What Endures. And the big question that we're going to be unpacking in our study is what does it mean to live and to live well in a pervasive awareness of the end? And what is the relationship, as the rabbis understand it, between mortality and meaning? So what I'd like to do is I've done again all credit to Claude for helping with this in designing lesson plans with AI. I've been able to help kind of like expand my own range of thinking and generate a good question to lead us into the deep end of the pond where we are going to dwell today. So the question I'd like to ask, and today not rhetorical, I will invite some moments for comment. What would change about how you spent today or this time in your life if you knew with certainty that you had only 1 year to live? Now, for some of you, this is entirely hypothetical. For some of you, you may have actually walked this path with a loved one. If you are walking this path in actuality and have not disclosed it to me and would like to make some private time with your rabbi, that is one of the many things that your clergy are here for. But I hope, I hope for everyone this is a hypothetical, at least for yourselves. So I'll repeat the question and then invite comment. And I'll take plenty of time for the question to sink in because it's a high impact kind of inquiry. What would change in your life if you knew with certainty that you had only 1 year to live? Judy?
I have thought about this, and the older you get, the more you think about this. I turned 85 in the last year, and in January, my birthday's in August, I said, I don't have a lot of years to live, or I might have more to live. Whatever time I have is very precious. And I've shared this with my family and friends. The world is in terrible shape. There's so many things that one could be very sad and upset about it. And I am putting up a guardrail. I am a very lucky person. Right now, I even have my health at this age, which is very important. And I am not going to let our leader of our country and the world itself get into my kishkas. I want to remain a happy person because I should. With all I have and with all the good health and family and friends, I've got to be a happy lady, and I am. And I'm lucky because I have this temple which supports me and inspires me, and I have friends and family. It'd be a pity that to me to not be a happy person amongst the very sad world that we're in. Don't, I take note of everything. If there's something that I could do personally, do it. But I'm very aware of the time I have left. And if it's 1 year, I guess I'd have to stay with what I'm doing because there'd be too many things. I don't want to travel anymore. We've done it. 1 year is a short time. I think I would just do lots of great things, probably mostly with my family.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, Mom and Dad, this will be interesting.
Doesn't our teaching encourage us to live as if every day might be our last one on earth?
Well, don't get
So,
ahead of yourself. We've got a lot of text to cover today.
okay, but
Yeah.
I'm saying that in some sense, if you can come to, an age at which we all know there's a definite endpoint. If you come to a point where you figure, it's more close than more far, I think your life should have been attuned to keeping on the same path. I don't see any major, changes with 1 year to go. I'm not suddenly going to, buy real estate, go on adventure cruises, that kind of thing. I think that, your concerns as you get older will certainly become more refined. But I think everyday existence is in preparation for the fact that there won't be an endless number of days.
Thanks, Dad. It's nice to hear that.
Mom's here. She's got something to say.
May I add something?
Of course.
I think it enables you to try to worry less about the things that maybe for much of your life have caused you to worry,
Hmm.
and really try to understand what's important and what isn't, and not waste your time with needless worry, even though I haven't perfected that path yet. But I keep trying.
From one needless worrier to another, I feel seen in your comment. Thanks, Mom. Um, Arlene? Arlene, you can unmute. Did we all freeze? That's so disappointing. Oh, we froze for a moment. No? Arlene is frozen.
Did.
Someone's frozen.
Uh, yes, no.
Okay. It says my internet
I'm
connection is
frozen.
unstable.
You
That's unfortunate.
or
Right.
Oh,
uh,
we
You're
can hear
fro-
we can hear you just fine.
oh, you can. All right. I think that
Now, John froze.
I'm so sorry. There's quite literally
Yeah.
nothing I can do about this right now. I'm on the proper router. I can try changing routers, but it might disconnect the class.
He's a statue now.
Do we want to try this again? Arlene, do you want to try this? I'm so sorry. No matter how much I beg, cajole, and plead, we have not addressed the shoddy Wi-Fi in the office. All right, I'm going to try changing the router. Please don't hang up, folks. If you can hear me, don't hang up. Don't hang up. This will freeze the class for a moment. All right, let's see where we're at. Anything better happen? Hello.
we're having someone come today from Verizon because we can't use Optimum any longer in New Rochelle because we don't have fiber.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
we're
can people hear me now?
switching to
I'm
Fios.
seeing.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes,
we're
All right,
back.
I changed routers. I don't
Okay.
know if it's on our end or somebody else's end. It's a real pain in the tuchus, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. So I think I would probably want to try to use a little bit of the time to sit down with each one of my grown kids and their families and find out if they have any special wishes of things that they would like to be able to experience with me without actually saying, of course, to the kids, this is my last year. But my hopefully my children, my adult children would realize that. And whatever I could even think about, even in terms of my relationship with my husband, to find out if there are certain wishes that he would have, and and to try and maximize the time in some way. But I agree with your father. Each day should be lived that way.
Hmm. Thanks. Okay, Michelle, you're next.
To some extent, this is always a concern. I mean, I fully expect another 25 years, as I keep telling my doctors. Um, but
Really?
I would say for those of us who have responsibility, continuing responsibilities for other people, in terms of, helping them on a day-to-day basis, it's always a worry. Um, what if something happens to me? And given a set time, you try to address those. I can't say I would see it in a positive light,
Yeah.
because there are things you cannot fix. And one of our goals is to become, you want to be indispensable, but it's also to be dispensable for all. So, and I know, people, friends with kids with significant disabilities and things like this, and I have family members like that, and it's always with you. And I don't know if a calendar changes that, a clock changes that.
Thank you, but your comment meaningfully expands the discourse because you've made it clear that for some of us, it's not just about you, it's about the other people and the other people who may depend on us and how that affects them as well. Thank you, Michelle. Even Jay, please.
Yeah, that's funny. I agree with Doug. I really wouldn't obsess over what's going to happen in 12 months. Unless I guess during this whole 12-month period, I was really not well. I personally, I don't think about death.
Hmm.
It's not something that's in my mind at all. Knowing that you're not going to live forever. But interesting, this morning when even I woke up and we were laying in bed, I think I want to talk to my granddaughter and do an interview and tell her about my life from the time that I grew up and the family uh, before, which we've never really talked about. And then he
Hmm.
suggested that I do it with Amy, maybe also Amy and Jocelyn. So that's
Beautiful.
how I feel. I don't think about that. Life is very good, and I'm very happy.
I I want to add, first of all, that was the first thing I thought about when Jay told me he wanted to do this um, interview was where does that fit in the whole picture of life? So
Hmm.
we definitely are coming at this from different points. But I think to some extent, I live with what happens in the future a lot. And we are planning a trip this summer to basically see family in Europe, in large part because two of my three cousins are dealing with serious illnesses,
Hmm.
and we obviously don't see them a lot, and it's an opportunity to be with them, since there's no way of knowing how long they or we will be around.
Right.
And
Yep.
a feeling that uh, for me, that I have to do that while I can.
And
Right.
also to show our grandson Nate was going to be in Bath, England, Paris.
Hmm. That's
That's the
an
plus side.
That's a nice thing to look forward to. And yeah, I appreciate like there comes a time when you realize like every visit with a family member or a loved one, a friend might be the last time you see them, and how do you want that to unfold? All right, I'm gonna take one more, but there is no other hand raised, but only because the psalmist said that the span of a person's life is 80 years and 10, or given strength fourscore years. I think everybody who has spoken, and I hope I'm not breaking any trust here, everyone who has spoken thus far is either in one's eighth or ninth decade of life. Everybody is 70 or older. But there's one person who's joining our class today, my buddy Scott Copeland, who's our congregant. So nice to have you here, Scott. You and I think our decade starts with the number five. So we're now in our sixth decade of life, if I have that right. And is your perspective any different? Like, would you quit your job if you knew you had only a year to live or something different?
Well, that absolutely, right? There's no reason to spend time with my work colleagues if if the only time I have left is with my family. So I think first I would just, it's really just it's being upfront and honest with my family and letting them know. My grandmother passed without letting any of us know. She had cancer, and there was always a lot of tension in the family going, because not knowing she had cancer in the beginning, and we all wish she let us know because I think we all would have acted differently, if we knew we had limited time. So I think that's the most important thing. And it's one of the biggest things is really just being upfront and honest, letting everyone know what's happening and letting them know, what I would like, but then at the same time, what they would like, and just really get to appreciate the time that we have left, with the family. I've been trying to spend a lot more time with my dad. He's 83, and my mom, who still works at 83, which is pretty wild. Um, and Jay, I think, as you just mentioned, my father and I are starting this whole thing on history of the family, and we're recording it. And I put together, a really big family tree that spanned not only my family, but my wife's family and my brother's wife's family. So this way we can all see the interaction, and really start to understand who our family, where our family came from, and kind of really pass that on to my kids. It's a question they have, and it was also something my two grandparents didn't want to do. The two matriarchs of the family didn't want to provide that information. So I think that's really important so the kids could see and really understand, how difficult their lives were. I mean, my grandfather told me he had eight siblings, and they slept in beds together because they didn't have, they had like a three-bedroom house in Providence, Rhode Island. So just to kind of get everyone to appreciate, where we came from and where we are today,
Mm.
because life is very easy today for them. And I think, yeah. So it's just really in getting closer to my family. And then one last trip to Israel.
Mm.
Trying to get my wife to plan another one. I know once everything dies down, but it would have to be another trip to Israel. I love going there. I love the people. And I think it's important. I've seen massive changes in my children's outlook on Judaism, their connection to religion and their connection to the state of Israel through those trips.
Mm.
And really trying to get the rest of my extended family to go so they could feel the same. And the ones that have been on Birthright, they are very connected and have a very strong pro-Israel view. So I know this is extremely long-winded.
Not at all. That was so thoughtful and moving, and I'm really grateful that you answered. Well, you were voluntold to speak up, so thank you. And the next time you're in town, Scott, I'll make sure that if it lines up with when my parents are in town, they're on the call today, Doug and Marge Blake.
Yes, I saw that.
That if
Yeah.
you haven't actually had a conversation, maybe you've met very casually at a WRT thing, but my folks live in Rhode Island and spent, over 20 years in Providence. So it'll be interesting for you guys to compare
Oh,
notes.
Very much, we would very much like to make that connection, Scott. So we'll set that up.
absolutely. The pens, PENN. There's a lot of them.
Oh, don't know,
Okay,
don't know
okay,
the name.
okay.
Yeah. Well,
We'll
yeah.
get in touch
Yeah,
on
it's a small
the
state and
download.
everybody knows
Oh,
everyone. I mean,
everyone knows each other. I went to college there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jewish
So that's Rhode
geography
Island.
is especially dense. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to move us into our study with this as a very meaningful, expansive way of leading in, because the rabbis would actually have us press the question even further. And the rabbis would ask, well, what are you waiting for? And why are you waiting to know when your death will come? And what does it cost you in real life not to know? So that's what today's texts are about. We're going to look at two. We're going to look at Brachot, tractate Brachot, 17a, and at Tractate Shabbat, a few pages from the very, very end of Tractate Shabbat. Maybe noteworthy that these are the first two tractates of the Babylonian Talmud. So Brachot, or blessings, is the opener. And then Shabbat, which is a very long tractate, over 150 pages long. And a page in Talmud is not just a single page, a daf, folio pages. The Shabbat is one of the longest tractates in the Talmud. Both talk about what we do with the awareness of mortality, not at the end of our lives, but now, in awareness of the end of our lives. So let's dive in. I know we've said the bracha already, so we can just go straight to the first text that I have teed up, which is from Tractate Berakhot, Daf 17a, and we're looking at the Safaria enumeration of paragraphs. This is paragraph 8. So I'll bring that up on screen for us to look at. Okay, so Margala Bifumaihu de Rabbanan de Yavne. Okay, so this is Aramaic, and it says that the sages in Yavne were accustomed to saying, it was their habit. Meragla means it was regular. Like if it sounds like the word regular a little bit, like there it is. I don't know if that's an actual cognate or a false cognate, but it was a regular thing for the sages of Yavne to say. Yavne is a very significant settlement in rabbinic history. It is the first place where the rabbis set up shop in the very wake of the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem at the hands of the Romans in the year 70. The famous story that is told in the Talmud itself is of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who smuggled himself out of the, smoldering Jerusalem under siege to entreat with the emperor of Rome, that he might have a small colony where he could set up shop in Yavne, which is closer to the Mediterranean and slightly north of Jerusalem. So it is west of Jerusalem, more coastal, where he could train disciples. And that, of course, is the beginning of the rabbinic project. So the sages of Yavne were used to saying, Ani Bria. Literally, I am a created thing. Like a Borei Pri Hagafen, Borei, or Bereshit Bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or when we bless over the wine, we say Borei Pri Hagafen, blessed is the creator of the fruit of the vine. Bria, in Aramaic or Hebrew, is a created thing, a creation. Or here they say a creature. Keep doing that. V'chaveri bria, and my fellow is also a creature, that which is created. All right, and you can see my counterpart who engages in other labor is God's creature, but I think that's unnecessary glossing. You don't need that to read the text in a sensible way on its surface meaning. So I am a creation, or I am a creature. My fellow is a creature. Ani melachti ba'ir. I work in the city. My labor is in the city. V'hu melachto basadeh, and he works in the field. Ani mashkim limlachti. I get up early to do my work. V'hu mashkim limlachto, and he gets up early to do his work. Keshem shehu eno mitgader bimlachti, just as he does not presume to do my job. Kachani eini mitgader bimlachto, and I do not presume to do his work. V'shema tomar, and lest you say, ani marbe v'hu mam'it, I am greater and he is lesser. So if you are inclined to think that just because I do this and he does that, that therefore I am somehow aggrandized and he is diminished, shaninu, it is taught in response, echad hamarbe ve'echad hamam'it, whether one does much or one has little, one has much or does much, or one has little or does little, Uvilvad sheyachaven libo lashamayim. The only thing that matters is that one directs one's heart to heaven. And they're saying one who brings a substantial. Okay, so they said one who brings much and one who brings less. Quoting from Rav Hai Gaon, I was not familiar with the context here. In other words, what you bring, what you do, is not actually how your worth is measured. So somebody maybe unpack, and I don't like playing guess what the rabbi is thinking. At least not, don't try to guess what I'm thinking. But if you wanted to venture a guess of why we are starting our conversation here today, when I've set up the theme is awareness of mortality and the meaning of our mortality, what does this text contribute to that? This text, which proposes, look, I'm a creature, he's a creature. I do my work, he does his work. I get up early to do it. I take my work seriously. He takes his work seriously. And lest you think that somehow what I have to offer is greater than what he has to offer, think again, because the only thing that matters is that one directs one's heart to heaven, which is another way of saying that one is living in awareness of something bigger than oneself. Call it God, call it cosmos, call it existence, call it the big, echad of the universe. What really matters is that, not how one toils and what one yields from one's toil. Karen, do you want to kind of make a linkage that might work for us today? Please unmute.
Sure, but brief.
Great.
I believe this is a reflection of the idea that different abilities don't matter, that the contribution one's mind and ability in general can make is not the leading factor, and it shouldn't be a reason for pride or for considering oneself better than or less than someone else or less than. Even that's important because if a person is ill, their capacities are reduced.
Yeah.
They can't be considering in their whichever decade you want to talk about it, because it could happen anytime, that they are of less merit. That's
Right. Their capacity is reduced. Their abilities are reduced. Their fundamental value remains the same. Right? So this word bria, I am a created thing, I am a creature or a creation, and my fellow also. That word bria is doing some very heavy lifting in this passage, is it not? Right? Because it is suggesting that my ultimate worth is not what I do, but rather who I am, who I was made to be. That's point number one. It is also suggesting a sort of radical egalitarianism, right? It's not just about me. My fellow is no less worthy. And it matters not one bit what he or she does. It is much more about the fact that one is a bria. And if you didn't get the fact that bria implies, if we talk about ourselves as that which is created, the implied component, of course, is creator. That's where this small but very impactful passage ends. Living in awareness of creator, right? Living in awareness that you are a creation necessitates that you go even further and say, I'm directing my heart to that force, the life force bigger than myself. Again, however you choose to understand God, whether you embrace God in a theistic way or an atheistic way or an agnostic way, if you do not center yourself as the center of the universe, but realize, like, I didn't have any choice in the matter about how I came here, whether or not I came here, and neither did my fellow. Therefore, we are living in a kind of submission to a power or a will greater than our own. That will change your fundamental outlook about what matters in life, including what this person yields or gives. And I did check in my notes. This is a quote from a Mishnah in Tractate Menachot, which is about sacrificial gifts. So the line, even though it was condensed and I couldn't figure out from the translation what it was pointing to, my notes tell me The line is pointing to a Mishnah where whether one's sacrifice is greater or lesser than his fellows matters not one bit. The intention behind it is what matters. I thank you for your comments. I think that's Karen, you're spot on as to why this matters in terms of what it means to live in awareness of the fact that we are a creature, and perhaps, though not stated, also implied here is that which is created is finite. Right, and we're gonna get to that more explicitly. Let's take Linda, and then my mom and dad have a hand raised as well. So Linda Markowitz, please. Linda, you dropped. Are you with us? Or you lowered your hand? Okay, mom and dad. Oh, you're
No,
here. Hi.
I didn't unmute. I didn't unmute is what I didn't do. I lowered my hand, I didn't unmute.
Yeah.
So I think our time here is so limited that to a certain extent, our individual nature doesn't matter. Um, what really matters is that we are part of a continuum of something much greater than any one person is. You know, 2 or 3 generations, nobody's going to really remember us, but whatever it is that we leave behind us gets carried on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks. Okay, my parents have a hand up as well.
Just me now. Mom had to scoot.
Okay. Yep.
You asked the question, what were the rabbis thinking, perhaps, when this was written? And again, I come back to the results of the Jewish revolts. And I think at a time in which humans across the Middle East and certainly from Rome were deified, their emperors became deities. They wanted to erect statues of them in the temple. That in a land where perhaps those who were ill prepared for life or were injured or had defects were discarded or not cared for. I think this is an admonition to remember our all shared humanity. And I can't help but feel as though that's part of the thrust. And John, I'm also thinking of your niece and nephew Jacob and Shira, and you can elaborate on that if you would care to.
Yeah, no, born into this world with cerebral palsy, and so most people look at Jakey and Shira and are immediately struck by what they cannot do, which is walk without assistance, talk in a recognizable language. I do think they talk. They talk. They don't communicate the way we do. Toilet themselves, feed themselves, take care of their physical needs. They are, on the other hand, I mean, you follow the logic of this passage where it is leading. They are God's creation. Above all, their worth is determined by that and actually by that alone. And they're equal not because they're twins, but because they're just like you and me. Okay, so 2 paragraphs earlier in the same sugya. Okay, so I'm actually going out of order, but I'm doing that because sometimes to read Talmud in sequential order actually increases the difficulty of parsing the argument. So, and by the way, some of this is recommended by AI, which is like, if you switch the order of this, it might make more sense. I'm like, well, I wouldn't have seen that myself, but gosh darn it if you aren't right, my buddy Claude. Okay, so we're gonna bring up on screen the second paragraph that I want us to examine, which is actually 2 previous. So this is from Brachot 17a, but now we're looking at paragraph 6. So Rabbi Yochanan, and remember we were talking about the sages of Yavna. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's the big daddy. He's the founder of the colony of the sages of Yavna. So we're still in the same period, very, very early, even pre-Mishnaic period. The wisdom would be anthologized into the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan, ki hava misayem sifra d'Iyov. So when Rabbi Yochanan would complete the book of Job, all right, what do we know about the book of Job? Just a quick sidebar, because that's going to be helpful to us. Anyone want to just venture a thoughtful single sentence comment on what is important to know about the book of Job, what it's about? You don't have to be a deep theologian. You don't even have to have read the book. You've probably heard. Okay, Dad?
The cosmos is not constructed to the needs of human wants and desires.
That's a beautiful theological summary of the book of Job, right? God or the cosmos is not calibrated to your experience and what you think is right and fair and your suffering. Like that is not the center of how things run. Good. So it's a book about suffering, and what it means to be a human being. It's a book about the human condition with a particularly grim appraisal of what that means. So, okay, so now with that helpful comment in mind, because it's not just any book that we're talking about, it is the book of Job, probably the most theologically daring and challenging of all of the books of the Hebrew Bible. And the fact that it was canonized alongside, theology like in the book of Deuteronomy, which basically said, God will punish the righteous, punish the wicked, and reward the righteous. It flies in the face of everything that is taught in Deuteronomy, at least, and much of Torah. All right, so Rabbi Yochanan, ki hava misayem sefer de'Iyov. When Rabbi Yochanan would complete the book of Job, Amar Hachi, he would say thusly: Sof adam lamut. The end, a person's end is to die. Let that sink in. The rabbis are not really into euphemisms. Right? The rabbis do not play nice and gentle when it comes to talking about death. The rabbis are interested in a face-to-face confrontation with the truth. I want you to let that absorb too, because this flies in the face with how American culture, I think Western culture generally speaks about death, if we speak about it at all. When I was working as a chaplain in the hospital during my rabbinical training, I remember actually, I worked in a hospital before I entered rabbinical school. I was an operating room nurse's aide for a couple of years and semesters when I was off school, summer and winter, in my freshman and sophomore years of college. The only time in my life I've gotten up like before 6 a.m. to do work, willingly. And I remember like hearing the kind of like hospital talk. Oh, Mr. Smith expired, like he was a carton of milk or a magazine subscription. Um, like, no, you don't expire, you die. But okay, people want to say anything but the truth when it comes to the hardest truth. All right, so the end of a person is to die. V'sof behema, the end of a beast, lishchita. And the end of a beast's life is to be slaughtered. Like, if that isn't a blunt comparison, I don't know what is. V'akol l'mita hem omdim, and all are going to die. Everything is destined for death, as it says here. And I don't love the fact that Steinsaltz felt the need to like give us so explicitly the meaning of that. Therefore, death itself is not a cause for great anguish. I'm not sure that's really what the rabbis are trying to say. I think we should just leave it without the gloss because the gloss is not in the text. The gloss is the gloss. The gloss is Steinsaltz, the editor, saying, well, this is what it means. But I'm not sure that's the only thing it means. It's not that you shouldn't be anguished. It's that you should just accept that this is reality, right? People die, beasts are slaughtered, Shabbat shalom. Like, let's move on. Okay. The next line, though, it does say something about your happiness. Ashrei mi shegadel batorah. Therefore, happy is the one who toils in Torah, who is raised in Torah, who is brought up to Torah. Gadel, from gadol, to grow large. So blessed is the one, or happy is the one who grows up with Torah. The amalo Torah, and his labor is in Torah. The ose nachat ruach liyotzro, and who makes nachat ruach. This is literally nachas. It's the actual word that in the Ashkenazi pronunciation, nachat becomes nachas. So, and who literally works in nachat ruach liyotzro, in giving nachas to his creator. Vi, in the next line, gadel b'shem tov, and who grows up with, or who is raised to have a good name, b'shem tov, right? See where my cursor is? V'niftar b'shem tov, and passes from this world. Niftar literally means becomes a corpse. So a very blunt word. Not pass away, not expire. Like I hate it when people say, "I'm so sorry you lost your grandma." I always want to snarkily respond, "I hope you find her." It's like you didn't lose her; she died. Okay, the Niftar b'Shem Tov, who becomes a corpse with a good name, min haolam, becomes a corpse or leaves this world with a good name. The alav amar Shlomo, and about such a person, King Solomon said, Shlomo is Solomon, Tov Shem Mishemen Tov, literally a good name from good anointing oil. V'yom hamavet miyom hivaldo, one whose death is like the day of his birth. So here's what they say. A good name is better than fine oil on the day of his death than the day of one's birth. So a comparison. Steinsaltz, maybe helpfully here, says one who was faultless. I don't know if it's about faultless, but who acquired a good name in life reaches the day of his death on a higher level than he was or she was at the outset. So the accumulation of a good name is the project of life more than material acquisition, for instance. Thoughts just on what this text does, perhaps to amplify the case made in the paragraph that we read first, but which actually comes to down in the sequence? Judy?
The relationship, it's there's a question here of, and we talked about this last week about the relationship to humanity. And this is more relationship to the deity. Is that not right? It's if you're living a good life and also the interesting thing also is about dying. Everything alive dies. And I think part of this is also acceptance. The beautiful flowers are some of the beautiful flowers, the daffodils, they're gone. They're dying. And new flowers come and they die. And even the acceptance of the circle of life. My sister died at 92, the day her sixth great grandson was born. So there's the idea of we are all going to die. This idea, by the way, today you've given me the idea. I'm going to talk to my children about what they would want if they knew I was going to die in a year. But anyway,
I love that you have the kind of relationship with your family where that's good dinner table conversation. It is
yes,
good dinner table conversation, but some people just aren't there.
but also I think part of this is an acceptance. You live but then ultimately, you have to recognize there is a creed, something above us that should be recognized.
It certainly doubles down on this idea that living in awareness of that which is greater than ourselves, whatever that means, right? Again, Rabbi Jack Stern, alav shalom, may peace be upon him, was fond. I've read all of his sermons that are published in the collection that the temple put out for his 80th birthday,
Right.
which was 20 years ago now, because we just had his 15th yahrzeit and he died at 85. Um, when when you read Jack, every time he brings up the word God as a kind of invitation to contemplate how we understand God, he always says God however you choose to understand God. It's always offset, like with a qualifying clause that I love, and I've adopted it as my own kind of rhetorical practice when I talk about God, because I don't think we're talking necessarily about the inculcation of a physicalized supernatural deity in order for this theology to work, in order for the aim of the theology, which is actually about not so much how we believe. How we believe is how we believe. Judaism is not particularly dogmatic when it
Right.
comes to what it wants us to believe. In fact, I would suggest it is radically anti-dogmatic most often. But it does have a lot to say about what Judaism thinks a life well lived is all about. And a big part of that is, however you get there, living in an awareness that it's not all about you is, I would say, if not enforceable, it is a powerful Jewish norm that is part of the project of meaningful living as the Jewish tradition frames that project. You gotta, as Bob Dylan memorably sang, you gotta serve somebody. You gotta serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, right? And so the choice of what we serve and how we serve really matters. Um, Less than how you believe. It's about how you serve. Okay, Arlene, please.
Um, One of the things that I should share, and especially Jay, because you've talked about how you can contact your grandchildren. My husband lost a very good friend who was living in Canada, and for about 35 years, they would write to each other a couple of times a month. At the beginning, it was just pen and paper, and then it became the computer. When he passed away, my husband felt the loss terribly, but also because they would share things about their lives. So when he spoke with this man's daughter, she said, Lee, you know what I think you should do? Start to write to your kids, your grown kids, and just tell them whatever you want to say about your life, what you can remember. And maybe some of them will enjoy it, some of them will read it, but it'll be on their computer. And at some point in time, if they want to put it together, they have that option. Well, my husband decided he's going to probably put a book together of
Mm,
some of the things that he's written to them over the past 10 years. And I
mm.
think it's a good move.
It's a
And it
beautiful
makes you
practice.
feel as if life goes on. We had a very unfortunate experience, or a very disappointing experience, last Friday. We went to a reunion of our college. And when I first met my husband, he ran the Student Center Policy Board at NYU. He was in charge of all the sessions of any kind of socialized event on campus. Well, guess what? When he arrived and we were both there together, people said, Oh, I don't remember you at all. Of course not, because many of them were 20 years younger. So why should they? And then he turned to me when we left and he said, We live really through our family members and for the people that are most important in our lives. But
Lovely.
whatever things that we may have been in charge of in the past, that goes by the wayside after a while.
Thank
And
you.
it's true.
It really is. Thank you. And thank you for sharing personally through this anecdote. Audrey Stoyer's comment in the chat box, if you haven't seen it, comments in a pragmatically helpful way here that the wonderful organization, which has a beautiful partnership with WRT, Dorot, has a legacy
Yes,
project, and a volunteer works with you after over 6 to 8 weeks to help you develop your story, your family history, and it can be
right,
written, oral, or a combination. It can include photos, and so go to
right,
dorot.org, I think, and or just look up DOROT, Dorot Generations, and
right.
they're just tell them WRT sent you. It's a special organization. Jonathan, you have a hand up, and you also asked in the chat box, what about perennials that come back every year? Do they really die? All things die, my friend. All things die, even perennials. Stars die, galaxies die, but just on their own timeline. There are trees that were here before I was born, and they're going to outlive me by centuries. Tortoises as well. Um, but everything that lives dies. That's the law of entropy. If you'd like to know more about that, I'll put a link before we end today in the chat box to a podcast that I recorded for the cleverly named podcast Exit Strategies, which is run by Plaza Community Chapel, the funeral home on the Upper West Side, where I was interviewed by the CEO, Stephanie Gary, about um, about this stuff. It's a podcast about death and dying, but we talked about what it means to be a self, and how what we think of as ourself is actually a construct rather than an objective reality, or at least the only objective reality of our lives is not that we are a self. If that makes no sense to you, that's why you should listen to the podcast. So, Jonathan, do you want to comment here?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to point out that the definition of Islam is surrender to God. So, and then on that theme, I love this book written by James Kugel, How to Read the Bible. And after he
Yeah, that's on
explains
my
about,
shelf over here. Sure.
I think it's one of my favorite books, actually, for religion, that is. And he after saying that, questioning about who really wrote the Bible and what the meanings are and everything, at the very end, what he talks about, he says, nevertheless, whatever, all with his understanding, we are here to serve God. So that whole idea of serving God is what this is all about, whether you consciously do it every day or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do question this idea about equality, because on this earth that does not exist.
Right.
So are we really living the ideal? Probably not. And I think we had that discussion, Rabbi, about funerals, right? So it's the same problem. We preach it, but does it really happen in reality? And I would say no.
Yeah, I would agree. I would 100% agree. And I would even take it one step further and say that, the rabbis would themselves say that living out of alignment with the fundamental truth that the reason we are equal is that we are all created, we are all equally creatures of the divine or children of God. The fact that we live in such a way that is not in alignment with that precept is at the root of human suffering. Not only for the have-nots, by the way, but also for the haves. To live out of alignment with that awareness is a primary driver of human suffering. And that if we could only live in alignment with that precept, that every living thing is an image of the divine, we would be living in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, and not where we are in the world as it is with all of its suffering. But grateful to you for this comment. Okay, we're gonna now jump, and the through line here is actually that both texts that we're looking at today, Tractate Berakhot, which we've just examined, small bit, and Tractate Shabbat, which we'll examine also in a few selected passages, find support for their wisdom in the wisdom of the book of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes, which alongside Job is one of the more, blunt appraisals of the project of human life, right? Ecclesiastes most famous for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. But that's in chapter 3. The first sentence of the book of Ecclesiastes, after introducing the kind of like, these are the wise ruminations of King Solomon, it goes on to say, everything is vanity. Everything is the futile pursuit of wind, right? So with that as your thesis statement, imagine what kind of wisdom flows. And so Ecclesiastes, if you want to talk about the reality, the overriding reality of our mortality and what that means for how we live, in awareness of it, you could do a whole lot worse than to look to Ecclesiastes to back you up. And that's exactly what the rabbis are doing. So, and you can even see Steinsaltz helpfully says, well, we're in a longer section of Gemara that's quoting from Ecclesiastes. So I'm going to just do the English here because the Hebrew is a little bit tangled and it's mostly just quoting from Ecclesiastes. So it's a long form unpacking of a single verse. On the day, so the Gemara continues to interpret verses from the book of Ecclesiastes. The verse states, all right, this is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 3, as you can see from the citation. On the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and this is Steinsaltz just filling in the elliptical section that's not directly quoted in the Gemara above, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders shall cease, because they are few, and those that look out the window shall be dim. So this is a very kind of out there psychedelic image. The day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, the strong men shall bow or bend over themselves, the grinders shall cease because they are few, and those that look out the windows shall be dimmed. What is this strange psychedelic poetic imagery really talking about? Well, according to the rabbis, here's how we understand this verse. On the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, this is referring to the flanks and ribs that surround and protect a person's internal organs. Quote, and the strong men shall bow themselves. These are the thighs which support a person's strength. And the grinders cease. These are the teeth which decay and fall out. And those that look out the window shall be dimmed. These are the eyes which become dimmer. So this is a graphic, explicit portrayal of what happens to a human body when one is dying, right? The support structures for your vital organs fail. You are bent over, so you lack the strength to stand. Your teeth decay and fall out. Your eyes go dim, right? This is an unflinching portrayal. And if I've called up the actual text here, when the guards of the house become shaky, is how they translate it, and the soldiers are bent, and the maids that grind grown few are idle, and the ladies that peer through the windows grow dim, and the doors to the street are shut, with the noise of the handmill growing fainter, and the song of the bird growing feebler, and all the strains of music dying down. When one is afraid of heights, and this is like T.S. Eliot, by the way. This is his, right? This is like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Check the reference. I'm not going to take time out of class to do it, but this reminds me of like T.S. Eliot poetry. When one is afraid of heights and there is terror on the road, for the almond tree may blossom, the grasshopper be burdened, and the caper bush may bud again. But mortals set out for their eternal abode, with mourners all around in the street. So, in case you missed it, you got to read all the way to the end of this little poetic two stanza bit to know that we're talking about mortality, right? So, this is this almost like psychedelic expressionist imagery. I picture like if we were to assign a painter to depict this, I'd pick on Edvard Munch, whose famous picture of the Scream, right? There's something German expressionistic about these images. So this really, I geek out to this as a once but always poetry major. The poetry of this, the imagery of this, the way we depict what mortality really looks like. And then the rabbis make it explicit. Like, yeah, you talk about like the watchman failing and the structures that have held a person in life begin to disintegrate before our eyes. That is what is awaiting all of us. I think I've kind of said what I want to about that. I would welcome comment, or we can proceed. I guess the question I might ask us by way, just before we proceed, is why all of this unflinching detail? Why does it matter? Dad, is that where you were going to go with your thought or elsewhere?
I just want to say that no less than when the Talmud was written, is this difficult to bring to anybody's attention. And I'll just tell you that at my last book group, which was last week, a group that's centered in Asheville, North Carolina, around University of North Carolina alumni, or intelligent people. I brought to their attention the book Being Mortal by Atal Gawande, which, if nothing else, states exactly what is in Ecclesiastes. And boy, the initial reaction to this was, why would you bring this book to us to read? Boy, is this, why do I didn't even want to get into this kind of thing. And then on reflection, they said, well, yeah, this is important things to learn. But I'm telling you, John, that the reluctance to talk about the actual process of your life ending is not a welcome topic to this day.
I know this well as a pastor. What I see encoded in our sacred literature today, I live every day. And I've also been present more times than I can count for the holiness of receptivity to the truth, however late it may come. It usually does come. There usually is a moment of deep confrontation with this reality, either for the dying or for the loved ones of the dying. There comes a time when you can run, but you can't hide. You cannot escape these truths. And the rabbis are kind of, I think, not so gently, not just an invitation, but they're forcing a confrontation with this. A lot of this is also ritually enacted in Yom Kippur, right? So I was sensitized to this by my beloved friend and teacher, Larry Hoffman. And it is also gorgeously expressed in a book that you must add if you've read Being Mortal. The next one you need is by the late Alan Lew, Lew, I think Alan, Alan, who wrote a magnificent book that is, again, must read, must have on every Jewish bookshelf. It's called This Is Real and You Are Totally Unprepared. And it's a walkthrough of the entire experience of the holiday cycle for the fall. from Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temple, all the way through Simchat Torah and the spiritual dynamics of that cycle and how it draws us to an awareness of our mortality, which is enacted ritually and dramatically through the Yom Kippur liturgy. To wit, we wear white like the shrouds of the dead. We do not nourish ourselves. We do not engage in procreation. We do not adorn ourselves. We are like dead bodies. We evacuate the ark of its Torah scrolls. The word for an ark in Hebrew is an aron, which means a closet or a box. It's the same word for a casket. So it is as if when on Kol Nidre we take all the Torah scrolls out, we're staring into an empty casket. All of this, by the way, I'm teaching through B'Shem Omro, in the name of the one who taught me, Rabbi Larry Hoffman, and it's in Alan Liu's book as well. The symbolism of the Yom Kippur ritual, and I'm only scratching the surface here. That's tip of the iceberg. The entire Yom Kippur ritual is an enactment of our own mortality. So again, this is to corroborate my point that the rabbis are insisting on an honest confrontation with our own mortality. Okay. So, a couple of interesting lines, perhaps more fanciful. And again, suspend your literal disbelief. I know you share it with me. You should know that. But it's really interesting. So this is on the next page of Talmud. And it says, Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Abahu. I'm highlighting in the Hebrew above. Kol she'omrim bifnei hamet, anything that is spoken in the presence of the dead, yodea. He knows. The corpse knows. Okay, you're going to be like, really? Okay, just take it. Don't take it on faith. Just take it as literature. Everything that is spoken in the presence of the dead knows. Ad sheyisatem hagolel, until they roll the lid on top of the tomb, until they roll the stone over his grave. Okay, until he's thoroughly planted, the dead can hear and is aware of what is being spoken about him or her. Okay, and then it goes on from there, and you can see in the English, it says pligi. Pligi means there was a disagreement. Uh, there was a disagreement about this. Rabbi Chia Rabbi Shimon Barabi. So there was a disagreement on this claim by Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon in the name of Rabbi. It's just the name given to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the great rabbi of the Mishnah. Chadamar, one says, so this would be Rabbi Chia's position is, Ad sheyisatem hagolel, until they put the stone on top of the grave. The Chadamar, with the other saying, Ad sheyit akel habasar, until the flesh has completely decomposed. So in other words, one has a shorter time frame. Once the grave is sealed up, that's the moment where the dead stop hearing and listening to what we're saying about them or about anything. The other one says, no, until you're completely like a pile of bones, all of the flesh is gone, so like a year, then the dead stop hearing what you can hear. Now, again, I'm not going to ask us to debate the literal merits of the argument. Science would roundly disagree, though we don't know. Obviously, nobody's been back to report, hey, I was a dead body and I decomposed, but I could still hear what was going on. I think there's certainly a pastoral truth to this. In terms of Jewish practice, this teaching informs the specific way in which a Chevra Kadisha, a sacred burial society, treats the dead. When a body is brought for preparation for burial in a traditional Jewish setting, the Chevra Kadisha, the sacred society, refers to the body not as a dead body, never ever. And never by first name, by the way. It's always Mr. Schwartz, Dr. Berkowitz, Mrs. Liebenfeld, like whatever it may be. And they'll say, will you please turn Mrs. Liebenfeld over on her side so that we can wash her back? And verses from Psalms are recited. So in other words, the body itself is treated like a living thing, which may suggest also, hearkening back to our first text today, that the fact that you are a creature or a created thing, the fact that you are physical stuff that did not ask to come here, but that was brought into life from a power beyond our own, merits reverence for the body itself, but also through the body, reverence for God, right? That this is a divine creation that you are now holding in your hand and preparing for burial. So I think that's what I wanted to extract from this text, and that's why I chose to include it in today's learning. Audrey, would you comment here, please?
So does that mean that in the interim between the actual death and the unveiling, that this would pertain to that? I mean, are they, because what is that, 11 months traditionally?
Yes, correct.
Oh, God. Maybe that's why my father always said you don't speak ill of the dead.
Well, yeah, I mean, your dad was a smart guy. But yes, that's in part why the custom is not to unveil the grave until 11 months later. Some of it is physical. It's like that is tracked to when we believe the body has decomposed beyond recognition as the person he or she once was. It is also, I think, pastorally again. There's something to be said for giving people a full year to observe all the cycles of the year, all the holidays, both the Jewish holidays, but also the first Mother's Day without her, the first Father's Day without him, the first birthdays and anniversaries without them, so that you can understand what it means to be a person without this person. Um, Beautiful conversation I once had with a congregant at the grave of her husband who died much too young, insidious brain disease, and just, you know, struck him down in his. He was diagnosed at my age, 52, and died at 57. Um, she said, I realized that the unveiling is not only. I mean, I told her, I said, the purpose of an unveiling is to tell a mourner you are no longer a mourner. Your main mitzvah now is not to mourn, but to live. That's sometimes a hard thing for people to hear, but that's really what Judaism needs to communicate. She said, yes, and it is also to say he's really dead. Like this is really over. Like to underscore permanence, which is why, of course, you lift the cover off the stone, and there it is, quite literally inscribed in stone. Thank you, Audrey. Even Jay.
I'm wondering whether or not they're really talking figuratively in that they're talking really about the soul of a person. I mean, there are theories in noetics that consciousness is not in your brain, that it's in the ether, and
Mhm.
that it comes in through something, and that when you die, that consciousness is still there.
Read the new book, came out in February or March by Michael Pollan, author of The Omnivore's Dilemma and How to Change Your Mind. Wonderful, both scientist, philosopher, a very gifted writer, spiritual seeker and practitioner. His new book is called A World Appears, A Journey into Consciousness. And he explores all of this and more, Jay. And it's shaped very much how I think about the text we're looking at today. So lovely. Okay. I want to make sure there's room and time to complete the text that we've laid out. We've done a really good job this semester of covering everything in our classes. That is also AI assisted. The lesson planning, I've been kind of saying, make sure we can do this in 90 minutes. And that's where the specific study guide that AI is preparing for me uh, comes along. The highlighter is mine, by the way. Like you actually have to study it, but I'm just gobsmacked at what is possible these days for education. Okay, so uh, now we get finally, my dad teed us up in the first few minutes of class, and finally we have a homecoming with one of the most famous teachings in Jewish tradition. And when I thought about, well, what are the treasures of Talmud? Most classes we've hit on a phrase or a teaching that was already familiar to us just by being travelers through the Jewish tradition. So here's this one. And remember, this is all part of the last part of Tractate Shabbat, which is this long form confrontation with mortality. All right, so we're going to look at page 153a, and the way Safaria enumerates, this is paragraph 5. And I'm going to do this one all in English. If we want to refer back to the Hebrew, as I think we will, we can. I want to make sure we get all of this in. We learned in a Mishnah So it just says Tanu Hatam, Tanan Hatam. It was taught there. And how do we know it was a Mishnah? Because the word Tanan is the Aramaic word for Mishnah. It points to, there's a Mishnah on this. Okay, we learned in a Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer says, repent one day before your death. Thank you, Dad, for remembering this text. Rabbi Eliezer's students asked him, but does a person know the day on which he will die? Obviously, a rhetorical question. Everyone, well, of course you don't. Like, unless you're sitting on death row, and even then, who knows? He said to them, Rabbi Eliezer responded, all the more so, this is a good piece of advice. One should repent today, lest he die tomorrow. And by following this advice, one will spend his entire life in a state of repentance. Now, I'm going to editorialize here. I hate the translation repentance. So I'd like us to just substitute the Hebrew word teshuvah, which is not about guilt and forgiveness. Teshuvah is about reorienting your life. Teshuvah is about where is your awareness, right? What are you serving in this life? To go back to Bob Dylan, who are you serving? But even more, what are you serving? What is your life really about? Teshuvah is the project of reorientation around what matters. It's about changing the self, of course, but it's very much about changing your life. And if you transform yourself, you transform your reality. You transform the reality in which you live. So he's saying you should do teshuvah now. Pivot now. Turn now. Because you could die tomorrow. And by following this advice, one will spend one's entire life in a state of teshuvah. And King Solomon backs it up with, again, predictably, we're drawing on Ecclesiastes, so this is consistent. Shlomo said in all of his chokhmah, all of his wisdom, at all times your clothes should be white, and oil shall not be absent from upon your head, meaning that a person always needs to be prepared. And by the way, traditional death ritual, traditional Chevra Kadisha preparation of a body, white shrouds and anointed and bathed before going to one's final rest. So again, the Yom Kippur reenactment, you got to live every day as if it's Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, Les Gutterman, who is one of my rabbinic mentors and was my senior rabbi for my first 3 years as a rabbi at Temple Beth El in Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the secret through line of today's class. Les Gutterman gave a beautiful sermon that I heard once, which talked about the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. Anyone want to know which is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar, according to Rabbi Gutterman, which I love? Dad, do you remember this one?
Today.
Well, right. Though he preached it on Yom Kippur and he said tomorrow. He said the holiest day on the Jewish calendar is tomorrow. Because it's not what you do in shul in the ritual reenactment of the confrontation with mortality that matters. It's what are you going to do about this when it's not Yom Kippur?
He's such a wise guy.
He's such a wise guy. And a truly great rabbi. And that insight, of course, like so many insights of my teachers, remains with me. And I'm so grateful to be able to share these with you. And by the way, just without repeating them, take a peek before you leave today in the chat box, because others in this class are contributing their own insights and their own teachers to these insights, and that is a beautiful thing.
And we won't mention the picture of the monkey with lipstick.
That is a different Les Gutterman-ism. So finally, the final passage we're going to look at kind of takes all of this and puts it forth in the form of an allegory. A parable, right? Which is a very rabbinic thing to do, to illustrate a statement with a parable. Oh yeah, by the way, just so you know, you may not ever have read Shabbat 153a, but you may still be familiar with Rabbi Eliezer's teaching from Pirkei Avot. Here it is in Avot, and many of us on this call today have studied Avot together with me. So in a different frame, the frame here is, here are some nice things that Rabbi Eliezer, also a wise guy, said. Right here, let's capture Rabbi Eliezer's greatest hits. Let the honor of your friend be as dear to you as your own. Be not easily provoked to anger. Oh boy, these are great teachings. And his other famous saying is, repent one day before your death. But the Talmud is where you get the elaboration of that precept, right? Well, how do you know one day before your death? That's where the rabbis insert this either real or imagined dialogue between Eliezer and his disciples who said, excuse me, teacher, how do you know one day before your death? And the answer is all the more so, live in teshuvah now, right? Don't wait. Getting back to where we began our class today, what would you do or what would you change? What would you do differently if you knew with certainty that you had only 1 year to live? One way or another, whatever you said, even if you said, I wouldn't fundamentally change anything, you still answered the question the way the rabbis wanted you to. Everybody said something that I would translate as live your teshuvah now. Orient your lives around what matters, right? And what are you waiting for? Okay, so the final passage we'll have a chance to look at is the parable, and it's sequential right after this Rabbi Eliezer teaching about repent one day or make teshuvah one day before you die. So we've heard that from the great Rabbi Eliezer, and again we've heard this rabbi's name before today, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the founder of the Yavna sages. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Mashal, a parable. Oh, gosh, every time I do that, it makes me nuts. I'm sorry. It's the one thing that I can't stand about Sefaria is that if you click down to try to highlight a passage, it shuttles you because it thinks that clicking on a passage means you want to look at the commentary. Sometimes you do. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Mashal lamelech shezimen et avadav lis'uda. So we're going to tell an allegory or a parable about a king who invited his servants to a banquet. Velo kava lahem zman, but he didn't set the time. Okay? Lo kava lahem zman. Pikechin shebahem kishtu et atzman v'yashavu al petach beit hamelech. So we said those who were wise got ready, they got all fapitzed, right? They got all dressed up. Here it says they adorned themselves, but I would say in Yiddish, they got fapitzed. They put on their best clothes and they just sat at the doorway of the palace, right? The king said, I'm throwing a banquet for all of my subjects. Everyone's invited. So the wise one said, time to go. Let's go. Let's stand at the gateway of the palace. Amru, they said, Klum chaser leveit hamelech? Is the house missing anything? Are there any needs? Like, can I help? Do you need anything for this great feast? I'm ready. I'm ready, boss. Let me in. Here I am, but I'll on your time, of course. But is there anything I can do to help you throw this feast? Tipshin, which it says the fools. Tipshin is actually a modern word in English. Tipesh means an idiot or an imbecile. Very funny side note on this. When I was living in Israel in 95, 96, Israel was not in kind of very current with its media. Now with streaming media, everyone with licensing notwithstanding, everyone can pretty much in the first world countries can watch new TV at the same time. Or new releases in the theaters at around the same time. But when I was living in Israel, it would take 6 months to a year to see a movie. And therefore, many of the movies that were released in the theaters when I was in Israel, I had seen the previous year in the States. One of those movies was the great Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels comedy Dumb and Dumber. Okay, so Dumb and Dumber, if you've ever seen it, is stupid as heck, which is why it's a great comedy. I think it's a Farrelly Brothers comedy. Fame also Rhode Island. Rhode Island has somehow found its way into every. I didn't even plan that one. The Farrelly Brothers are famous for There's Something About Mary, that great comedy with Matt Dillon and Cameron Diaz and Ben Stiller. Okay, anyway, Dumb and Dumber comes out in Israel the year I'm there. Do you want to know what Dumb and Dumber is in Hebrew? It's hilarious. It's tipshim bli hafsaka, which literally means idiots without interruption. Like it's not Dumb and Dumber isn't a thing that makes sense in Hebrew, so they just changed the title to idiot tipshim bli hafsaka. It literally idiots without intermission, or idiots on without pause. Okay, that's a fun sidebar. I had to get it in. though it took us away from a very serious text. I'm sorry. Okay, so what do the Tipshim do? Right? The Tipshim, these guys, the idiots. We know what the wise people are doing. They're waiting to be led into the palace, and they're even saying, "What can I do to help for the feast? Is there anything you need, boss?" Tipshin, shebahem halchu limlachtan. They had work to do. They had jobs to get to. They had to go about their ordinary daily routines. Amru, they said, Klum yesh seuda belo torach. Like, hey, can't have a feast if we're not working. And so we're going to go do our regular business. So what's the difference between the wise and the fool in this allegory?
Can you repeat your question?
What differentiates the wise from the fool? And again, just to recap, the king throws a banquet. He does not announce the time. And so the wise immediately get dressed for the banquet and line up outside the palace because what could be more important than being invited? And he invited all of his subjects. Everyone is invited to the feast. That's an important detail too. The wise line up at the gate of the palace ready to get in and even saying, "Is there anything I can do? I'm ready for the feast." The fools say, "Well, I've got work to do." And you can't have what's a banquet if we're not actually out here in the field toiling? So what do the rabbis want you to understand about and of course this is all in light, this isn't just an abstract allegory. It comes in this long passage about the confrontation with mortality and at the end of the day, what it all means. So this is the text that we're going to leave one another with today. So I want to make sure that we get something yummy out of it. Okay, Audrey, please.
I would say that the wise are the fools and the fools are the wise.
Say more.
Well, because the alleged fools understand that they're integral to the creation of the feast and that you can't have, first of all, there wasn't a time set. So you have to keep going and do what you have to do. And that is helping to prepare for the feast.
Ever the pragmatist, Audrey. And I want to make it clear that in the eyes of the rabbis as well, the fools are not lazy. They're not sinful. They're
Right.
highly pragmatic people. Now, I'm going to show you where this goes, but I want to take maybe one other comment. Dad?
What Audrey said.
Okay. So let's see what happens here. So the fools go off to do their labor, and the wise are lined up, ready to go. All right. Now the second part of the parable. Suddenly, pitom, very important word, without warning. Pitom means all of a sudden. Bikesh HaMelech et avadav. The king requested that his servants enter, like the doors to the palace open. The wise among them entered before him adorned in their finest clothes, and the fools entered before God. Sorry, did I say God? I meant the king. Oops, I kind of spoiled the allegory in case you weren't getting it. Dirty. They had to rush from the fields. The king was happy to greet the wise ones and angry to greet the fools. The king said, "These wise servants who adorn themselves for the feast shall sit and eat and drink, but these fools who did not adorn themselves for the feast shall stand and watch." And I'm not going to read the Steinsaltz because we could do a better job of understanding what the parable wants to say. It is not important whether you agree with it or not. I want you to unpack what the rabbis are teaching. Dad, you want to take a stab?
Well, the first thing I want to say is au contraire, rabbis. But their point is they are identifying the wise as people who have prepared all along for the banquet. So when the banquet comes at any time, I'm ready to walk in. Is there anything missing? At the last minute I can do, but I'm ready. And the other said, I'm working and working and working with no thought to any banquets here because that's just not on my agenda.
Right. And again, Scott was probably the most helpful respondent in our opening frame today because as a person who's not retired, not close to retired, in a time of life where the demands of work and labor are
Okay.
ever pressing, it is meaningful to say, yeah, but if I only had a year to prepare for the banquet, I would not spend it getting dirty in the fields.
Okay, but on
If I
the other
really knew that I could go into this banquet at any minute,
hand, there seems to be, if you want to, change it around, it's the wise people, so-called, who are sitting around to get in as if somebody else is going to do it for them. Well, here I
Right.
am.
yeah.
And, the fools are really the ones I, I have to keep laboring because that's the way it gets done. And if you want to put
Right.
it, the purpose of of the path of Judaism, I think if you agree that it's somehow directed towards moral perfection as we age, our code is to perfect things. We are not there trying to appease deities. We are not looking for eternal salvation. We are not learning to escape the wheel of reincarnation. We are looking for the moral perfection of the world,
Right.
and that takes
Right.
continual work. And for that, I'm going in the company of the fools here.
Right. Me too.
Or, or
Or
maybe if you're willing to, read this allegory in a maximally allegorical way, the rabbis never really say what they mean by adorn themselves. And I'm not persuaded that adorning themselves means just sitting around looking pretty. I
You
think
think
that
adorning themselves with wisdom.
yeah, it could be with wisdom or actually seeking that moral perfection as their primary project and their ordinary toil as secondary in the order of priority. As it is often said, nobody wants to be eulogized for how much time he or she spent at the office. Nobody really wants that to be the declaration of the ultimate worth or meaning of their lives. And so there may be a way to harmonize our own discomfort. However, it is authentically Talmudic to eschew the desire to harmonize the ending of the study, right? It is totally
yeah.
fine with me as a teacher of Talmud not for us to land with a tidy bow around this.
Okay. All
I
right.
kind of like ending on a note of, hmm, well, that's a lot to chew on. And so, Michelle, you're going to get the last word from
Okay.
the class, and then I'll put a link to this podcast in
Okay. Good.
So two observations. First, um, the thing about metaphors and allegories is you really can only push them so far. If, as you specified at the beginning of reading this one, our king invited everybody, we would then have everybody stopping their toil, and we would not have food to serve, cooked to serve. We would not have crops raised till this unknown timing of events. In real life, our births and our deaths are staggered. And so we have, overlapping supply chain. Sorry, it's the economist uh, and pragmatist in me. The other, there's only so far you can go with it, with any of these. The other thing I wanted to observe, which might have been a little more relevant earlier, is something my father, and some of you have probably heard me say this before. There was a time where the phrase "life's a bitch and then you die" was very popular, and
Wow.
my dad was deeply offended, and so he rephrased it as "life's the reward, you get it first."
That's gorgeous. I hope that I'll remember both the way he put it, and I'll put that in the sermon file. It's quite beautiful. And in my way of reading things, quite Jewish. Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. My friends, I've put a link in the chat box to a podcast which is only tangentially related to what we talked about today, but maybe more than tangentially, actually. A lot of the things that have been on my mind lately tend to surface whenever I have an opportunity to live in Talmud and teaching and learning with all of you. It's easily my favorite time of the week when I get to just be in the presence of such learners and teachers. So whether you are preparing for a banquet or just another day at the office, I hope that your day is filled with insight and beauty and the true uh, blessing of being a person who gets to live. Maybe that is indeed the reward. Enjoy it while we have it, my friends. I'll wish you an early Shabbat Shalom, and I'll hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.
All Rabbi.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.